There is a very interesting story told about Napoleon's trip to the Great Pyramid. Rumor has it that when he came to Giza on the banks of the Nile in 1798, Napoleon wanted to stay overnight in this most famous pyramid in the world, alone, in the king's chamber, in the heart of the stone tomb, at the spot where Khufu, one of the most powerful pharaohs of ancient Egypt, had it built for his journey to infinity. There is still a huge sarcophagus of the pharaoh there, made of red stone. It is even whispered from ear to ear that it rings like a bell when struck. Well, Napoleon, who came all the way from France, entered the pyramid by himself at night, armed only with a candle in his hand to pierce the darkness. He began to walk through the eerie and dark narrow passages, and finally he reached the king's chamber in the very heart of it. Now, how would you like to make such a journey from the comfort of your chair? Much has been written and told about the pyramids, because these are really interesting structures indeed. We can easily understand this even by looking at a map. Here, even the placement of them is not just a coincidence. See that line there, as if drawn with a ruler? True north. The facades of this building show the true north, south, east, and west. When they built this structure, we didn't have those satellites in space, or our computers, or maps that now allow us to understand how majestic they are. Even the compass, to show directions, had not yet been invented. That's the entrance gate just north of the pyramid. Napoleon must have gotten in from here. Of course, those iron-barred doors were not something in his time then. Right behind us lies the city of Giza, in the Cairo region. In the past, the waters of the river Nile used to reach where these buildings we see stand now. Of course, there are other pyramids, tombs, and ancient artifacts on the Giza plateau, but we will focus on the most magnificent of them, like Napoleon did, because this Great Pyramid is the only remaining structure of the 7 wonders of the world. It has been standing for 4,500 years. It's hard to imagine even now. I like to make an analogy like this. Can you imagine the 2100s from now already? What about the RR-leaning-S? Now think about the 2500s. But I am not talking about the 2500s, which is our near future. The 2500s before Christ. That's when they built these pyramids. When this building was completed, it became the tallest building in the world. And for 3,800 years, no other structure has dared to stand that tall. Around it are 2 more pyramids, just shy of it. All of these were built in those very ancient times called the Age of the Pyramids, and then this area was empty for almost a millennium. Known as the Great Pyramid of Giza, this structure was built for the pharaoh Khufu. It stands by 6,000 meters, 7 feet tall, and was built by placing more than 2 million stones, each weighing several tons, on top of each other with such precision. Let's get into it now. It has 3 special chambers inside. The uppermost chamber is known as the King's Chamber. In the middle is the Queen's Chamber. And to reach these chambers, many passages and corridors were built like in an ant farm. That bottom chamber is the most mysterious one. because it is formed by drilling the stone bed under the pyramid. Although it has been researched for centuries, we do not know exactly what any of them do. Now, let's go back to the entrance. We call it the entrance, but when these pyramids were built, there was no such a door. It is said that it was pierced by the seventh Abbasid Caliph, Al-Mamun, in 820 AD. In order to reach the corridors inside, this entrance is also called the Tunnel of Thieves. So, do you know who this Caliph Al-Mamun is? The son of Harun al-Rashid. You know Harun al-Rashid, the ruler of the period when the famous Arabian Nights were revealed. Content such as Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves and Aladdin's magical lamp had appeared at that time. We heard words such as "Open Sesame" from those fairy tales for the first time, and I guess it fits well with the opening of such a door, doesn't it? Open Sesame. Harun al-Rashid also became eponymous to a town called Rashid. So what's the point of this town, you might say? One of the most important stones in human history was found in that town. Rashid Stone, Rosetta Stone. Thanks to the inscriptions written in 3 languages on that stone, the translation of hieroglyphs was possible. If it hadn't been found, it would still be a mystery. So what was done in the 580 ADs became a kind of key that opened the door of these pyramids, both physically and culturally, to the ancient Egyptian civilization. Rumor has it that Caliph Al-Mamun's men opened this door with a battering ram to reach the original entrance. While they were trying to create that gate, they heard a great noise from inside. A very large stone slipped and fell due to the vibrations of the battering ram. This stone, which had been placed to hide the upward passage, rolled and fell with such a loud noise. They turned to the left side, where the sound came from, and when they started digging there, they discovered the main entrance. We are talking about the gate of a building that was built 4,500 years ago, and which was rediscovered 1,200 years ago. Of course, some archaeologists think differently. They believe that this gate was created relatively soon after the construction of the pyramids by who we may call ancient thieves. They think that they were making such an effort to steal great treasures buried with the pharaoh. Now, as you can see at this point, our path splits in 2. Normally, that place on the left, the passage going down, is not open to visitors. But let's go in anyway and have a look inside. Let's see what's down there. This passage leads deeper into the pyramids. Now we will descend about 90 meters, 295 feet. Extremely claustrophobic environment. One inevitably wonders what the pharaoh was like when seeing such a complex structure. But ironically, the only visual we have of Khufu, the pharaoh of this great pyramid, is this tiny 7.5 centimeters, 3-inch statuette. The queen of another nearby pyramid is thought to be Khufu's mother. By the way, Khufu's name is not written on the walls or somewhere of the pyramid. Archaeologists came to this conclusion from an inscription they found elsewhere in Giza. Yes, we have finally reached the underground room. As you can see, we are at the very bottom of the pyramid right now, and as I said, Normally, no visitors are allowed in this area. There are huge devices wrapped around like this. As you can see, it says, "Don't touch." So, can't touch this. When I first saw them, I did not fully understand what they were. But later, I had a theory in my mind about what these devices could be. Let's do our tour first. I will talk about this theory of mine, while I will be telling you about a very important development in recent years. The feeling of claustrophobia is increasing. This place is much more mysterious than the other two chambers above, because scientists have not found the slightest clue as to why it was built. And the stones here looked like they were left rough, unfinished, as if they left in a hurry, as you can see here. Here we see more gadgets and gizmos. It's obviously going to be an important experiment, but, as I said, we'll talk about that later. Right behind us, we notice that another pit has been dug in the floor of the room. Under the Great Pyramid, we are in a room carved into the stones at the bottom of the earth, and in the middle of it is a well. Let's go a little further. According to some archaeologists, Khufu was planned to be laid to rest in here first, but this was later abandoned. They say he was moved to the top chamber, but it's really interesting. Would you look over there? Yes, let's get out of here now. When I think about the millions of stones above us, I feel uneasy. Now we're back at the crossroads. We had just come down from there. These steps on our right lead to the passage leading to the two chambers above. Normally, this passage was designed in connection with the corridor just before, but in front of the passage that goes up in front of this passage, these three large granite stones were placed. The very first to write about the pyramids was the famous historian Herodotus. He wrote that Pharaoh Khufu was a very cruel ruler, but what he said should be viewed with skepticism, because even Herodotus lived 2,000 years after Khufu. This building is that old. The person who wrote the first comprehensive book on the pyramids is an astronomer, Piazzi Smith. The original publication, date of the book, The Great Pyramid that you see in my hand is 1880, and this person came to the region in the by Liu Ling S. Imagine that the region where the pyramids were located at that time was called the Egyptian Khedivitate. Under Ottoman rule, Fatma Turkan, who lives in New York, wrote a preface to the new edition of the book in 1978. She says, "This was one of the first books that tried to relate the purpose of the pyramids to mathematics, especially the pi number. It is the work that most comprehensively defends the thesis that it is a sacred structure built to escape the Great Flood, of course, as I said. Since it was written all the way back in the 1800s, there is not much left about the validity of this idea from a modern point of view, but there are still very beautiful illustrations and drawings in it. I think some still hold importance. That's why it's a real pleasure to be able to make such a modern trip through something scanned in 3D, while walking around the pages of one of the oldest books written on this subject at the same time. Of course, when there is a structure that has survived for such a long time, it is inevitable that thousands of tales will emerge about it. At the end of this corridor going up, we finally reach another, larger passage. It's called the Grand Gallery. A real engineering marvel. This gallery has a roof made of stones and is almost 9 meters high. Looking to the right, we see an entrance to a well here. This well provides a shortcut, a passage to that underground passage we just descended. Proceeding through the middle of the Great Gallery, we reach a horizontal corridor leading toward the Queen's chamber. Let's get in there now. Several boat pits were found around the Great Pyramid. It was discovered that 2 of them had funeral boats in very good state. Some of them are even exhibited in museums. The Egyptians buried these boats along with the king. Thus, they believe that in the afterlife, the king could travel on the River Nile. Yes, we have finally arrived at the Queen's chamber, but the Queen was probably never buried in here. We are now in the middle of the north and south sides of the pyramid. There is a small alcove in the east wall of the room. The purpose of this alcove is unknown, but the thieves dug a small tunnel behind it. There are also 2 chimneys in the Queen's chamber. Chimney hole. This one, and there is one right behind us. Let me show you like this. Right there. It was thought that these were originally built for ventilation purposes. In a straight north and south direction, these chimneys go almost to the outer surface of the pyramid, but they do not reach the surface completely. Let's do some measurements by zooming in. Because we can. Let's put it right here. A hole of about 20 centimeters by 20 centimeters, 8 inches by 8 inches. So what's inside these holes? To learn it, they inserted specially produced robots into these holes in the past years. Robots had advanced about 50 meters. Then, a few meters before the surface, it encountered a stone. Blocking the chimney, they managed to pass this stone with the robot camera. And there, they discovered a small secret chamber. On the floor of the chamber, that robot captured images of some complex shapes, the meaning of which has yet to be deciphered. With the emergence of these drawings, it was started to be thought that chimneys serve a much greater purpose than serving as ventilation. But, of course, it is not known what this purpose or those shapes are. Now, back to the gallery from the Queen's chamber. On the high walls of this great gallery, stone blocks gradually enter inwards, and in this way, they form a roof. Thanks to this construction technique, it can carry a very large weight on it. There is a canal in the middle of the gallery and shelves next to it. Inside these shelves, 28 compartments are cut on each side. Some think that there were wooden frames inside. These partitions and large stones blocking this passage in those wooden frames. But some also believe that they are a kind of crane mechanism made to move granite stones. We have come to the end of the Great Gallery. This corridor leads to the anteroom in front of the king's chamber. There is the last of the measurements taken to thwart grave thieves. We'll get there in a little while now. Of course, thieves are one problem, and vandals are another. Even Khufu did not engrave his own name on the pyramid he had built. But some clever fellows who felt the lack of this did not hesitate to write their names on the walls, as you can see. What a pity, yes, we came to the anteroom. This place is made entirely of granite. See those hollows. These are a mechanism used to move a huge door up and down there, because, after they put the king in the inner chamber, they sealed the room with these huge stones so that the thieves could not enter there. Yes, if you are ready, let's enter the king's chamber now. Here it is. It is the last and the top one of the 3 special compartments that we enter. Inside the pyramid, built entirely of granite, and these stones fit together in perfect harmony. The only thing in the room is the king's sarcophagus, which is also carved from a single piece of granite. Of course, it is technically impossible to carry a single piece of granite of this size through those outer corridors and narrow passages we just passed through. Therefore, scientists think that it was brought and placed there while the construction of the pyramid was still in progress, and then they built the room and the pyramid around it. On the roof of the chamber are stones carefully arranged in layers. It is made to withstand the weight on the top by sliding them into position. As in the Queen's chamber, there are 2 small chimney vents in the north and south directions. But the chimney holes here reach the outer surface of the pyramid. Now these could be vents, or they may also have been opened so that the pharaoh's soul could ascend to heaven. We still don't know. So, is that all? So there's nothing else inside the pyramid? There might be. Remember, I just said that little robots were inserted through these chimneys, and they had discovered a secret chamber. A much more advanced technological device was placed inside the pyramid a few years ago. This time, scientists decided to use the muon tomography technique. They thought that by measuring the muon particles, which constantly bombarded the whole Earth along with the pyramids, they could reveal the density differences of the stones inside. We can think of this technique as having an X-ray film, instead of the internal structure of humans. They reveal the internal structure of the stones here. Researchers from Nagoya University placed films sensitive to muon fragments in these corridors. Then they installed the measuring instruments, which they carried piece by piece inside the Queen's chamber. I think the packs we just saw during our visit in the underground chamber were parts of this device. And again, I think they will repeat the experiment in there, because a great discovery was made during this scan. They found that there might be a secret passage just above that entrance tunnel, which was opened during the time of Caliph al-Ma'mun, and where we started our tour. They estimate it to be somewhere between 17 to 23 meters, 55 to 75 feet, above sea level. This corridor is on a horizontal plane and at least 5 meters, 16 feet long. But there is a much larger gap than that. Somewhere above the Great Gallery is another space at least 6 meters, eBay centimeter feet wide. This discovery is the first major discovery in the Great Pyramid of Giza since the 19th century. Even after 610 Ybyte years, this structure still somehow manages to tell us mysterious stories. The chamber at the heart of the building and the mysteries inside are still unsolved. And when that happens, some things turn into tales of Arabian Nights. If you remember, we started with such a fairy tale. Napoleon came right up to this chamber. Passing through the roads, we passed that night. He spent the whole night alone in this room. And rumor has it that when he came out the next morning with a white face, he was trembling with fear. He did not respond in any way to those who asked what happened to him afterward, until he was on his deathbed 23 years later. Here is Napoleon on his deathbed. Just when he was about to rise painfully in his bed, straighten himself up, and answer those who asked what had happened that night, suddenly stopped. "No, what's the use?" he muttered, and he went back to bed again. "You'd never believe me,"